Good morning. Welcome to the 29th Annual Eggs and Issues from the Spencer Chamber. I'm Sharifa Jones, Executive Director of the Spencer Chamber, and I will be your moderator today. I'd like to thank Spencer Municipal Utilities for live streaming, putting on YouTube and taping to replay later, Mediacom, who is recording for later broadcasting, Spencer Radio Group for airing live on 102.5 and KICD 1240 AM, and the Spencer Daily Reporter. We will start today by having our guest legislators give a brief opening statement. Then I will open the floor to those who are in attendance this morning to ask questions. And finally, we'll address any questions that have been submitted on the form in the entryway. Please remember, the goal of this forum is to try and cover as many topics as possible in the time allowed. All questions will be shared with the legislators, so they may follow up with those who have asked the questions. Next, I'd like to thank our legislators who represent this region for giving of their time for this informational forum. Let's start with opening statements today. We will hear from State Senator Dave Raleigh, representing District 1. We will also hear from State Representative John Wills and State Representative Megan Jones. And with that, I would go ahead and welcome Senator Raleigh to start off our session.
Thank you, Sharifa. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for being here. So as the newest member of the Senate and having now a full 6 weeks under my belt, it's been quite an experience. I just want to remind you that I sit on the Labor and Business Committee, the Judiciary, and also Human Resources. And those are definitely the committees, the standing committees that I attend all committee meetings on. And then, of course, I sit on subcommittees as well. What I've seen the last 6 weeks has been amazing. They said that I would be drinking water from a fire hose, and it was every bit of that. It's a whole new world of stepping in and finding your way and navigating your way through knowing where your desk is, where the bathrooms are, and who the other senators are. And it's just been an awesome experience. It really has. I think I've sat in on over probably 300 bills just to listen to the discussions. Every issue has a pro, a con, and I want to thank everybody who does contact me and send emails, because it's that information is always used and very useful. Overall, this was funnel week, if I am getting all my timing right, and it certainly was all of that. Education, of course, SSA, I don't sit on that, but that got passed. Of course, the budget, tax bills, everything are taxes and Iowa relief for Iowans in tax. But it's been quite a week of seeing how this all progresses. In general, I am so excited about this legislature and what we're doing. This is a very, very responsible group, and they're working very hard to accommodate all the needs of Iowans and all the needs of Northwest Iowans in particular. So I want to assure you that work being done down there is sincere, it's genuine, and we're doing what we can to make sure that Iowa is one of the best states in the nation. So with that, I'll make my closing remarks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Senator Raleigh. And with that, Representative Wills.
Thank you, Sharifa. Thank you, everybody. excuse me. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Thank you for everybody online and watching on TV, that sort of thing. What a great day that it is. The sun's shining, and it's just a little cold out. But it is February in Iowa, so we know that that's going to happen. I really appreciate Senator Raleigh and the statements that he made, because as a new senator, he's been doing a great job down in Des Moines, and we really appreciate having him down there. I'll speak for Megan and myself both in that he's approachable and easy to work with, and so we really appreciate that. As far as what's happening in Des Moines for us, the last few weeks have been interesting. We've been busy. A lot of bills have been going through the system. And that means for every bill that happens, there's a subcommittee, a committee, and then if it makes it out of committee, possible floor debate. We've done a little bit of floor debate so far in the last few weeks. Specifically, we passed state supplemental aid for schools, which by law we're supposed to have done in 30 days after the government's governor's condition of the state address, and we did accomplish that. I don't think it made it to her office before that 30 days, but the House did accomplish that. And this week, on Wednesday, we passed a historic tax bill. For those of you that know me, 9 years ago, when I started running, one of my goals was to make Iowa competitive again, make Iowa a place that our kids want to come back to, make Iowa be a place where our kids would want to stay because we're competitive both in wages and on the tax end. Well, for so many years, Iowa has been around 33rd in the nation as far as competitiveness for taxes. We passed a historic tax bill last year, tax reform, and that was historic. And then this year we passed another historic tax reform bill just on Wednesday. Went over to the Senate, and we'll see what the Senate's going to do with it over there. We have a little bit of differing viewpoints on taxes, but I think that we're going to end up having something go to the governor's office fairly soon here in the session. And also, for those that know the political system, we're pretty early in the session to be dealing with tax bills already, and I think we've been talking about getting out of Des Moines fairly fast this year, getting down there, doing our work, and coming home. Typically, our date this year to be out of Des Moines would be April 19. That's when our money runs out, and I don't think we're going to stay there that long this year. I think we're going to be done. Maybe I'm being hopeful and ambitious in my thoughts, but every day that we're down there is a day that we could do some damage to the state of Iowa, and so we need to come home and do good things back here on our day jobs and just being good citizen legislators. So I really look forward to your questions and thoughts, so I'll be done there. Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Jones.
Thank you, Sharifa, and I apologize for my voice. I have situated. Can you hear me?
Oh, there, I hit the wrong one, sorry. Okay, so thank you, Sharifa, and I apologize for my voice. I had strep throat, and then I had a bout of food poisoning, and that did my throat no good. So it is what it is. I knew if I didn't come today, though, I was going to get yelled at. I fondly remember having a baby and sitting in the hospital and getting yelled at for not being at Eggs and Issues. So nobody wants to miss Eggs and Issues, and I appreciate that my attendance here is so important. But in any case, so this is a big week. It was a funnel week. Probably also not helpful for my voice, but we had a lot of committee meetings, pushed a lot of bills through committees, because if bills don't make it through committee this week, they are dead. And that is also very helpful. I think we could all have a collective sigh of relief, because there were some really bad ideas this session, and when that gavel fell, signifying the end of funnel week, I think we could all say, well, thank goodness that X bill didn't go through. So this clears off a lot of the bad idea bills and really narrows down the scope of the legislative session as to what we can be working on. My week really kicked off with emergency meetings. As you know, the governor's public health declaration expired on Tuesday night at 11:59. And unfortunately, there was a piece in there that allows paraeducators to work as substitute teachers. And school districts really, really need that right now, because we don't have enough substitute teachers the way it is. And so letting those folks who may not have the correct credentials but have some classroom experience be able to teach in the classroom and fill in that void is very, very important to our schools right now. And so people were kind of in a panic as to how we were going to fill in those gaps suddenly when the clock struck midnight. And so I am now the co-chair, I'm the House chair of the Administrative Rules Review Committee. And so basically what we had to do is approve emergency rules from the Board of Educational Examiners so that they could continue to let paraeducators teach as substitutes and fill in those gaps in the classroom. So probably not an issue everybody heard about, but it was still very important that we got those rules done. But at the same time, we need to put some parameters on that. So we were able to kind of make a deal with the governor's office and the Senate to put some parameters on those employees, make sure that they're getting paid appropriately, because paraeducators are paid significantly less in many cases than substitute teachers, and so they should be paid according to the job that they're doing. And then we also need to make sure that there's a good faith effort by the school districts to find substitutes who do have the proper legal qualifications to be a substitute before using a paraeducator. So that was an emergency meeting we had at 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning. It was kind of a crazy day, kind of a crazy concept. I don't think I've ever seen rules shoved through in 5 days before, and I'm not really impressed with that process. And I made sure that they knew that we weren't going to do that for anybody else. But just because of the crunch that we were in with education, I think we had to, and then we're following it up with a bill to narrow in those parameters. Other thing, the tax bill, we both have kind of talked a little bit about that. That's moving right along. I've heard a lot of comments, not people like some piece of the Senate bill, people like some piece of the House bill. I think it'll all work out once those bills are kind of reconciled between the two chambers, and I think we'll get a pretty good bill out of that. That said, tax bills and appropriations bills are exempt from funnel week. So this is a time where we start to build out the state's budgets. And so our budget subcommittees will start to be meeting more frequently and start to fill in those pieces of the budgetary pie in leading to adjournment, which I think most people want to do in 90 days. I think that's a pretty lofty goal, but we'll see. And I should say, put an asterisk after something John Wills said. He said that's when the money runs out. That's not when the state's money runs out. That's when legislators' per diem runs out. And so our expenses stop getting paid while we're in Des Moines. And so people tend to be more agreeable when they're paying for their stay on their own dime. So hopefully we can get done on time and move the ball forward and get out of there. But that's probably all I have right now, and happy to take any questions. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you, Representative Jones. With that, we're going to go ahead and start with questions. I would invite Mike Hoyk to the podium. Mike has questions regarding Medicaid funding.
Hello. Was here last session, spoke to you about the Medicaid funding for our care facilities in the state. Haven't heard much about that. Heard a lot about the tax cuts and the school stuff going on. Was just wondering if you could give me an update on that, and just had a couple other thoughts that kind of came up last time after I was here. Have heard some talk of additional 19 million possible for, it was thrown out to help the schools with their staff shortages, and I'm not saying I'm against that. I'm just wondering, there's other places struggling too that deal with young individuals, adults. I mean, if the schools are going to get helped out, why are these other ones being left out? I mean, I think there's a need in both places, and I'm not against one, the school issue. My wife works in the school system. I know what's going on. So was just wondering about that. And I know I threw out last time possibly IPERS being offered, and I think maybe, John, you said that was like for state employees or however that, I'm not sure how that works, but I have noticed in a local ad, the local hospital is offering IPERS to new hires. So maybe you could shed some light on how that works. I mean, they're a care facility, or our daughter is a care facility. Why do they not have access to the IPERS program also as a benefit? I guess maybe you could, because I did see that Spencer Hospital's offering that. So I guess I'm looking for maybe just an explanation on how that works, and any update you can give us on if there's going to be any increased funding for these places. I know where our daughter's at in Sheldon. My wife just spoke with her lead yesterday at length, and they're losing people. They've got fast food restaurant in town now up to $17 an hour, and the Quick Star right down the road's the same wage as they are. So, with that, kind of rolls into the corporate tax thing also. I've heard talk of cutting that or giving them tax incentives. Do we need 3 Casey's in every town and a Quick Star everywhere? Obviously these places aren't hurting. They're building as fast as they can find spots. So do they need to have a tax break, or do we need to maybe take better care of some of the citizens of the state that can't take care of themselves? So
Thank you, Mike.
that's all I have.
I would invite Senator Raleigh and representatives to go ahead and address Mike's initial question regarding Medicaid funding, and if we can also address any of the other issues that he brought up, I would welcome you to do that as well. So with that, Representative Jones, if you would go ahead and start.
So you've touched on a number of issues, and I think we've got a lot of the headlines happening, but so let's talk a little bit more in the weeds about what's all going on here. So Medicaid funding, the reason you haven't heard a whole lot about it is because we're getting through the policy bills, right? So funnel week is when we funnel down policy bills. So any bills that have a financial implication, that's going to be addressed later on in session. Now, the tax bill, we have been working on that, and SSA. Education usually gets the first bite of the apple because they're over 50% of the budget. So we do SSA first, and to what John Will said earlier, that bill has to be done within 30 days. So they get the first bite of the apple. When it comes to the 2.5% allowable growth, supplemental state aid, plus about 19 million for schools, I can assure you that my head has been ripped off more than once because it wasn't enough money. So the 19 million, I mean, quite honestly, what the schools were asking for was 5%, and we gave them 2.5 plus 19 million. So that gets them about at 3%, but that 19 million doesn't build on for next year. So it was a really ugly number for schools. I'm not particularly proud of it, but it's where we could land. It's where the negotiation happened. The House was the highest in the building when it came to that number. But, I mean, your point is well taken. I mean, the budget is a pie, right? So when you add here, you subtract here. But that all said, we are now in a position where 1 in 4 people in our state are on Medicaid. So 2 years ago, probably before COVID, it was 1 in 5. So we've added that many more people to Medicaid. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I don't think there's a lot of people who qualify for benefits through their job, through their employment, but we can't kick them off of Medicaid. Is that right? So the federal government has locked us in and said that these people cannot get off of Medicaid, we cannot roll them off of Medicaid. I think they were trying to prohibit states from just kicking people out to pasture and kicking them off of Medicaid. But the truth of the matter is, in Iowa, we have a really, really tough situation with finding employees, and a lot of these, but we have a lot of people in the workforce, but a lot of those people have the option of benefits through their employment, but we can't get them off of Medicaid because the federal government said no. So that's taking up a lot of Medicaid money, right? And that's just growing the Medicaid budget. So even as we stand here right now, even though we have not passed a bill, that Medicaid budget is growing. There is more funding being sent in through Medicaid just because we're existing. Coupled with that, the federal FMAP, it's a very interesting system. And when I was first elected, we were just going through this process. The federal government readjusts the FMAP every year, or every 10 years. And what the FMAP is the contribution rate for Medicaid, and the way they adjust that is based on, your wages? It's based on state wages, right? Or, okay. All right. Well, so anyways, basically you're punished. The better your state is doing, the less money. Employment. Okay. The better your state is doing, the less money you're going to get for Medicaid from the federal government, right? Because they figure you can make that money up from the state, right or wrong. That's how it is. So for a number of reasons, just because we exist and we're doing really well, we are getting less federal money, and they're locking us into all these people. So I don't think Medicaid is necessarily being left out. We just haven't gotten to the point of session, and coupled with that, it's already growing just because it exists. When it comes to IPERS, it depends on the legal structure of the entity, right? So Spencer Hospital is a municipal hospital, so that's why they have access to IPERS. Hope Haven is a 501c3, so they have access to a whole different set of benefits because they're a nonprofit organization, right? So they get a lot of special tax exemptions and things like that. So So I think that's probably why we can't get those folks into IPERS. I understand IPERS is a fantastic system, but that's probably why we would be opening up a huge can of worms and letting all of our nonprofits in our state access IPERS, and I think the IPERS community would freak out, and it's already a group that is very worried about their retirement already. The corporate tax, that's out of the House bill. I'm not particularly fond of those provisions. I don't know where we're going to land on that, somewhere in the middle, maybe, but your point is well taken. Why are we eliminating their tax incentives? Now, what I will say is that a lot of these corporations, these big time corporations that are just looking for a state to place a new facility, Iowa gets taken off the list right away just merely because we have a corporate tax. So when it comes to economic development, we are shortchanging ourselves because of that corporate tax, for better or for worse, merely because it exists. They're not going to look at our competitive property tax structure. They're not going to look at our competitive wages or our low cost of living. They ask the question to our director and say, do you have a corporate tax? Yep, you're done. Iowa's off the list. So we're missing out on a lot of business opportunities because that provision exists. And then, the other thing I wanted to talk about, and we had all gotten a note here, and I don't want to steal anybody's thunder if I'm, okay. So we had gotten a note here about Medicaid dental services. Our dentists have not gotten a raise through Medicaid for like 30 years. And so they're asking for about 30 million, I think. In the projected additional appropriation, from what I understand, I'm not on the committee, additional appropriation to Medicaid outside of the extra growth that is just happening, it's going to be about 60 million. Dental services alone is going to take about 30 of that. And that point is well taken. Dentists deserve a competitive salary a competitive reimbursement rate when it comes to Medicaid services. And they're really in a difficult position because they have a lot of input costs that they can't control. So when Medicaid doesn't give them the reimbursement rate that they deserve, it's not that they can just be paid a less hourly rate. We're talking about metals, right? So when the cost of metal escalates, that's less money that they receive, and they just are losing money left and right when they take Medicaid patients, and that's unfair. And what is happening is that dentists don't want to do business with Medicaid patients, and so rural Iowa loses out, right? So I think, long story short, I hope I answered all your questions, but I think we are going to see increases in Medicaid merely because it exists, but then two, specifically in dental, which is the note that we got here, but then also in other areas, I would expect a bump up. It's just not to the point in the legislative session to finalize those numbers.
Great. Thank you, Representative Jones. Senator Raleigh, if you would like to comment on that question.
It's hard to follow up with what Megan just said. There's a lot of great detail, and I can only share with you, when it comes to Medicaid, one particular conversation or meeting I was in was a good example of one of the issues that might be facing us with Medicaid, that the trail after people get on Medicaid, if the individual is employed or fully employed and has a new job and has a significant salary, the system doesn't really recognize that. There's a lag. And so you have people actually receiving some Medicaid where they don't really qualify for it. And then there's a time element, I believe, that's not brought up until an annual review of how all this works. So just in that case alone, from what I was understanding, is that can overload the number of people that are on Medicaid that actually may not qualify for it. They may not need it. So I can only offer that as an anecdotal story that I know is out there. My information that I shared last time I was here, that I believe it's $121 million has been, is that what was, no, I'm thinking of a different issue. So Medicaid is a large part of our budget.
Medicaid is the largest budget when you include federal funding.
Right.
Just state is.
And I think right now we're doing well, but looking down 3 years, we have to be positioned in order to support the system. And if we're 1 in 5 now, or 1 in 4, we're going to be laboring that quite a bit. So it definitely is on the horizon. As far as HIPERS is concerned, I think Representative Jones covered that very well, and I appreciate that. I'd be happy to look into it, but I think that was covered well. As far as schools, the 2.5% is what was used for the SSA. My understanding is the new funding, we've increased the budget $160 million and of new funding for K through 12. And that's 57% of our whole budget right there as far as our annual budget. And we've also increased the per pupil cost from the $7,227 to $7,413. And I want to add, too, that I'm not sure how this plays into it, but that $1,000 bonus that the governor talked about, too, for teachers, definitely has to play into this somehow, too, because of salaries. If you look at that, that's, even though it's one time, and maybe that's in the 19 million, but that's a significant help, for the time being. If I haven't answered your question as far as covering it right, I can visit with you afterwards too and get more particulars from you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Senator Raleigh. And Representative Wills.
I think that both Megan and Dave did a very good job of covering the subjects, and I think we got all the questions answered, but just a little bit of clarity on a few things. So when you're last, you get to mop up a little bit, and so that's what I'm going to try to do. The House Republicans this week, we launched our budget targets for the year, and the DHS, or Department of Human Services budget, is the budget that gets the biggest increase this year. And so we do see that there's a priority that's needed. I'm sure a lot of that increase to the DHS budget is going to be for Medicaid. So we are looking at that, and we've had no less than 2 conversations in the House about the dental side of it, and so it is a big issue. I just don't know where it's going to end up, but it's definitely something that we need to address and take care of. So the dental thing is going to be an ongoing issue for the rest of the session, I'm sure. Now, as far as taking people off of Medicaid, we've got what Megan said is 1 in 4 people in the state of Iowa are on Medicaid, and we can't kick them off. Now, in June, the federal government's going to discuss whether they're going to continue this extra. Basically, we accepted 6% extra Medicaid coverage, which is really paying our bills very nicely. But in doing that, we can't kick anybody off Medicaid. In June, the federal government is going to either extend that or stop it. And we've had to budget for that. With our tax plans and with all of our budgeting that we're doing, we're budgeting for that as if they're going to take that 6% away. And nobody comes off Medicaid. So we're budgeting very responsibly, but until we're allowed to remove people from Medicaid, our Medicaid bill is just going to skyrocket. It's just going to keep going up and up. And that's going to be a major concern, because when we have all of a sudden 2 competing areas of the budget, K through 12 schools and Medicaid, that both of them are a huge, huge portion of our budget, we're going to have problems maybe even 10 years down the line on how do we pay for both of these budget items. I just want to touch on the corporate taxes. I talked a little bit about that in my opening statements. The corporate taxes are so very important here in the state of Iowa, not because we make a lot of money off of them, because we don't. It's really relatively small revenue portion of our budget, but it is a huge thing because we're 44th in the nation, meaning we're towards the back of the pack in the nation in collecting corporate taxes, meaning our corporate taxes are high in the state of Iowa. That keeps us not very competitive for some companies, and Representative Jones did a very good job of explaining why that's important, because even though we've got good wages for businesses to come to, if that tax structure isn't good, they'd rather go to South Dakota or Illinois or someplace else that has lower corporate tax structure. And so the Senate has a proposal and the governor has a proposal to lower corporate taxes. The House did not have a proposal to lower corporate taxes. And sure, while we have Quick Stars and Casey's building businesses all over the state of Iowa, I don't know that they're getting a lot of tax credits for doing that. The Senate's version of corporate tax reduction takes away corporate tax incentives at the same time as it lowers the tax rate. And so as they get a lower corporate tax rate, they have less incentives as well. And I think that's a very appropriate and a good way to do tax policy. Why do you need the incentives if the corporate tax rate is lower? So I think those are some good things that we're going to be looking at. And I do believe we will have some corporate tax changes before we leave Des Moines, but I don't know what that structure is going to look like. But we definitely we need to get out of that 43rd or 44th in the nation and get us down more, at least to midway, so that we're more competitive for businesses to move to Iowa.
Thank you, Representative Wills. With that, I would go ahead and invite Michael Schnoes. Hopefully I didn't butcher your last name. And Michael has a question, I believe, regarding child rights, state parent rights, and some education issues.
I'll keep my question to one for right now. Unfortunately, in the state of Iowa, we have a large number of parents who are allowed to legally kidnap their children to Iowa and from Iowa. And I'll give you an example of this. So in Minnesota, say a couple are not married and they have a child together. Well, the one parent just moves to Iowa and files for child support in Iowa. And Iowa calls Minnesota and says, hey, you need to subpoena this gentleman or this female to court to establish child support. And they do that. Well, when that individual in Minnesota goes to court, all they can do in Minnesota is establish child support. And if the parent says, well, what about my visitation rights? The judge in Minnesota can only say, well, there's nothing I can do because your child no longer lives in our state. So the judge will say, if you want to ever see your child again, you've got to go through the Iowa court system. And if that individual doesn't have the financial means to do that, that parent in Iowa legally was able to kidnap their child out of Minnesota. So my question is to you is this: would you be willing to write a bill to reverse this and make it retroactive?
Thank you for your question. Representative Wills, if you want to start with that question.
Why do I always have the tough ones when I have to go first on? I am not a lawyer, but I'm going to say that across state lines, I don't know that, and Representative Jones might be able to correct me, I don't know that we could write a bill that would do something across state lines, but I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the legal ramifications of doing that. And so I don't know. I can't say yes or no because I really honestly don't know.
Thank you. Representative Jones, if you want to go ahead.
Sure, yeah. So there's a lot to unpack here because there's a lot of jurisdictional issues between Iowa and Minnesota. Kidnapping is a big word. That means a lot of big things from a criminal aspect. And so I don't necessarily know if we have a true case of kidnapping here, but the child is perhaps not with their custodial parent or the parent who has custody, right? So first of all, to answer your question about introducing a bill, we are currently prohibited from introducing any more legislation. That cutoff date was the end of January. So we won't be able to introduce legislation at this point. But certainly these conversations can happen and maybe there's a resolution elsewhere, right? So one, a lot of family law needs to be dealt with in the court system because blanket policy on a state level to address every individual family is very, very difficult laws to write, right? Because you can imagine there's a good parent, there's a bad parent, there's two good parents, there's maybe no good parents, you've got grandparents involved. I mean, there's all different ways that families live their lives. And so it's hard for us to write bills assuming the same familial situation cross applies in every case, right? But so the standard in Iowa through the court system, through case law, is the best interest of the child. And that's really what we have tried to follow, is what is the best interest of the child. So that's the standard. That's what judges are looking for, is how to decide these cases in the best interest of the kid. So to answer your question, it's not that we don't want to work on this issue. It's that we're absolutely prohibited at this point from introducing legislation. I I want to dig into the jurisdictional issues a little bit further between Iowa and Minnesota, but I can see where that would be a problem.
Thank you, Representative Jones. And Senator Raleigh.
I think Representative Jones said everything. I certainly knows more about it than I do, with her legal background. I agree totally. The court system would probably be the source or resource to go through on an issue like this. That being said, we're open always to hear the particulars, the details, and see if anything can be done legislatively. But again, the priority would probably go through the courts. And but as far as the information, you're willing to share it, we can always take notes and make note of it. I want to assure you that, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to invite Lauren to the mic, and I do want to remind everyone to please speak directly into the mic so that you can be heard well. Lauren's question is specifically about anaerobic digesters at large dairies.
Yeah, over in O'Brien County and within about a 20-mile radius of Primgar, there's a very large dairy north of Sanborn, about 6 miles. And there's been an anaerobic digester facility under construction there now for maybe 6 months or longer. There's another larger dairy that's 4 miles northeast of Sanborn, and that's a 5,400 head dairy. And that anaerobic digester facility has been under construction now for over 6 months. And that's the largest one, and that's in O'Brien County. And then in about a month, maybe start of spring, there'll be another anaerobic digester start construction, and that one is located 5 miles west of Paulina, right along Highway 10. And I think that's about a 3,500 head dairy operation. Now I've heard of another dairy west of Dune in Lyon County, and that's been under construction already. And then there's 2 large dairies out by Rock Valley that are both having digesters built. So I guess my question is, did the legislature do something 3 or 4 years ago to spark all of this anaerobic digester construction? All the biomethane gas that's being produced from these facilities is all being injected into Northern Natural Gas Pipeline Company pipeline systems. So I guess that's my question.
Great, thank you. Senator Raleigh.
Lauren, I'm going to have to defer to my compatriots here because I'm not familiar with that. I wasn't in the legislature at that time. And my ag background on digesters is pretty limited, if any. So I would pass on this to Representative Wills.
Great, we'll go ahead and pass that on to Representative Wills.
So I just wanted, this is a lesson in citizen legislature because we all have kind of like our areas of expertise, and I had no clue on the legal ramifications of that last question, but in this question, I actually know a little bit about it. So I can give you a good answer. I think it was last year or the year before. Last year we did pass the ability for anaerobic digesters to be, and by the way, thank you for your service, Lauren. I appreciate your service in Vietnam. But last year we did pass a bill that allows for anaerobic digesters to be built and used in the state of Iowa. And these are structures for large feedlots, large animal units. Mostly right now in the state of Iowa, it's dairy. Dairy operations are using them. But they could have hogs, they could have cattle, but definitely dairy. And so what an anaerobic digester is, just for everybody that doesn't know, it's basically a structure that has a cap on it, a dome, and it basically heats up that And in a dairy's point of view, a lot of water, but also the manure and the animals' waste. So it heats it up. It basically eliminates any pathogens, but also produces methane gas, because as part of that breaking down of those manure and waste products, it produces methane gas. And as you said, a lot of that methane is being used for energy, for natural gas, and it's being pumped into and maybe heating your homes right now, or it could be used for other things. And so we did pass this last year, and I'm very excited about this because it's really a good way for elimination of some nutrients, because nitrogen is allowed to dissipate into the air from these structures. And so you have lower nitrogen fertilizer that goes out onto the fields after they empty these anaerobic digesters out. And so you really have a really good product. Another thing that I'm really excited about with these anaerobic digesters is we've got a lot of small towns, and I'll just use Harris, for example. About 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, Harris was required to do some changes to their sanitary sewer system. And it was about $5 million to do these changes. Now, they ended up getting some grants through the USDA and that sort of thing that made it less expensive. But for those of you that know Harris, it's about 300 people, a very small town. Well, eventually, I think that we're going to get to a point where these anaerobic digesters around Dune or some of these smaller towns that have to do some work on their sanitary sewers might be able to partner with these anaerobic digesters and use that to help with their sanitary sewer problems, and it would be a very low cost and effective method. Right now, we're not doing that. We're not allowing that, so don't get me wrong. But I think that in the future, that may be something that we look at, that's something that would be a very logical and a very cost-effective solution for our small towns. So I'm really excited about anaerobic digesters. It's tough to say you're excited about manure. I was going to say poop, but I didn't think that was something I could say over and I just did. But it's an interesting thing because these are really something that I think are cutting-edge technologies. They're very expensive. I think the ones that the gentleman talked about, that Lauren talked about, are over $1 million a piece, but are going to do really good things for the state of Iowa, and so we're really excited about it.
Great. Thank you, Representative Wills. And Representative Jones, if you'd like to comment.
Sure, yeah. So I'll go at this from the administrative rules perspective, because when we pass legislation that requires rules to be written, as these obviously would because the DNR is very involved in this process, it's going to take at least 108 days after the implementation of the bill to get the rules written. And so I think we've seen one set of rules on these maybe, but it's still a new hot topic going through. And so I was just trying to look on my phone to see when those rules came out, and I wasn't able to find it, but it is still a very kind of developing area. And so John's the expert here, but it is happening. It is a result from that legislation, but I will say the regulators are very involved into what's all happening there.
How much does the state cover that?
Just a moment. If you would like to ask a question, if you could come up to the podium actually, so everyone can hear you, and just let us know what your name is as well.
I'm Mike Mart. What does the state pay back of $1 million for that digester? How much does it pick up the state or the federal government?
To my knowledge, I don't think there's any cost sharing available for those. It's such a new thing. There may be some federal money. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's why I was just asking that question.
I don't think the state has a program for it, so these are all being built on their own.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, would you come to the mic, please, Lauren?
I think it was last weekend there was an article in the Sioux City Journal where the Sioux City wastewater treatment plant has a digester in operation, and it's been in operation. But now I hear they're going to modify it, and they're going to collect the biomethane gas from the digester, and then they're going to sell, the city of Sioux City is going to sell that back to the local gas utility. I think that's the way I understand it.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to invite Lenny Scaletta to the mic. Lenny has a question regarding human trafficking across the state.
Okay, basically I've been involved in trying to compile information, and I've gone to, I moved up here last June, but I lived in Council Bluffs before that, and they have a Southwest Coalition on Human Trafficking, and the hospitals work with the law enforcement and everything, and we work with them trying to just help out and get information. I understand that there's a committee for human trafficking in the state capitol or whatever. There's only 3 people there. That kind of, raises a question. I don't know if that's true or not, but the point is can, on a state level, can they compile information? The idea is Sioux City or Council Bluffs or Des Moines has a lot of information, but to be able to compile that information and get the word out, have you thought about this? Watch out for this, all that kind of stuff. Is there some way of, doing that? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. I would invite Representative Jones to start.
Sure, yeah, so human trafficking is an issue that we deal with every session. There's kind of the annual human trafficking bill, because what's happening as our laws close in on these awful folks, they find new ways to circumvent them, or they find new businesses to have. And so I think I shared maybe last time, the bill that we passed last year targeted massage parlors, which are kind of the preferred business right now of human traffickers, right? And so we went at it from 2 angles. We made some requirements, up the requirements on the certification process, like the actual certificates of people who run and participate in massage parlors. But then also we cracked down on the landlords, because a landlord probably knows if they've got a massage parlor and a human trafficking unit coming out of that building. And so we upped the penalties on knowingly running or allowing someone to run a human trafficking ring through their rental property. Rental property. So when it comes to compiling the data and keeping track of all this, this is happening. The Attorney General's office is largely kind of the entity charged with a lot of the human trafficking issues in our state, particularly the training thereof. We passed a bill a few years ago that bumps up the training requirements for hotels and their employees when it comes to spotting human trafficking. And then there was something else I was going to say. Compiling information in the Attorney General's office. I feel like there's a bill moving maybe out of judiciary, but do you know about that?
I don't know what it is.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, so, I was going to talk about that committee. So there's no formal, policy committee on human trafficking, but that doesn't mean it's not being talked about or that it's not existing. So for a number of reasons. One, those are all judiciary issues, and so they'll go through each judiciary committee. So just because it's not called the Human Trafficking Committee doesn't mean that that human trafficking isn't being addressed in the legislature. There's just not a committee called as much. What's been happening over the years is that legislators will kind of create their own committees or their own caucuses. And so if there were 3 people at a committee on human trafficking, it was probably just something that a few legislators came together to talk about. So I don't want you to think that only 3 people at the Capitol cared about human trafficking. Any bill that I've been on that has to do with human trafficking, we get a whole herd of people interested into those committee meetings. So it is being talked about. We are working on it, and there's usually a bill every year.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Raleigh, if you'd like to answer that question.
I sit on the Judiciary in the Senate, and I can't honestly say that anything specifically human trafficking has come up, but peripherally, it's always there. And it's something to fight, it's something to go after, and it's repulsive. And so I can assure you that it is being discussed at all levels. We definitely, are watching how the borders are handled, and the trafficking that may be coming through Iowa up Interstate 35, and all of those issues are there. But and I can look after this meeting and specifically see which bills will address this specifically. But at this time, I just want to recognize and let you know, yes, absolutely, it's front of mind, but I can't point to a specific bill right now that's addressing that.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Wells.
Thank you, Lindy, for that question, because, a few years ago, somebody said, well, that's not happening in Iowa, and I most surely can tell you that it is happening in Iowa, and everybody in Iowa should be very well aware of human trafficking in Iowa, whether it be a young gal or a young boy from Sioux City, Iowa that runs away and then all of a sudden gets caught up into a trafficking network, or somebody who's transported across the Mexico border into the United States and then happens to come across one of our crossroads, because Iowa is a crossroads of the nation. We have many crossroads in Sioux City, Council Bluffs, Des Moines, Dubuque, the Quad Cities. They all have major roadways. I'm missing some, I know, but major roadways that cross the nation go through those towns, and they stop at those towns. Last year we did a terrific bill. I think it's probably the best thing that we've done thus far, because a lot of these traffickers are transients. They move. They don't stay in one spot for often or for long. And so last year, Representative Jones did talk about the bill that we did, but we basically said to hotels, you will have human trafficking training done, or we will not allow our state employees and state contractors to stay in your hotels. And so when a state employee is traveling across the state of Iowa, which many times they do, they have to look, if they're going to stay at a hotel, they have to look at a website that we keep track of if they have had and certified that their employees have had training in the state of Iowa, because I guarantee those traffickers do stop at our hotels. I guarantee, in fact, that there are events across the state of Iowa that are hotbeds for human trafficking. The state fair is a hotbed of human trafficking. There is, I've been told, there is more human trafficking in the state of Iowa during the state fair because of all the people that are there at the state fair. And so we need to really look at this as a priority, and we do. Representative Jones talked about we do a bill almost every year that has something to do with human trafficking, and we're very proud of that. I think that we are really making it tough on the human traffickers. Representative Jones has a program that Paul Pate, our Secretary of State, has implemented, but she wanted to kind of talk about that a second.
Yeah, thank you. So I remember this after I closed my remarks. So the Secretary of State's office, Paul Pate's office, recently rolled out a new program. So I'm glad we've got the chamber folks here, because this is a big deal for your folks. It's called IBAT, and it's Iowa Business Against Trafficking. And so you can sign up and register, and basically shows that your business is one that is committed to tackling human trafficking, that you'll have the appropriate training, and that you are going to be an upstanding business in the community. So you can sign up for that program through the Iowa Secretary of State's office. That's just kind of something he's done independently outside of the legislature, but it is a nice little designation to have on your business too.
Yes, go ahead.
And I just remembered as well, something else that we've done. If you've been in a convenience store, if you've been in a gas station and walked to the bathroom, somewhere along the way, you'll see a sign that says, if you're a victim of human trafficking, and it'll say it in Spanish too. Those are all things that we've done because we want to raise the awareness, and we want people to know that this happens in Iowa. But we also want those people that are trafficked to know they have the resources, they have the ability to get out of those situations. And that's important to know as well for those people that are being trafficked, because sometimes they don't think they have any options.
Thank you. And I would also mention too, Representative Jones, you talked a little bit about the chamber. And so one of the things that, as businesses who are chamber investors, we specifically, as these bills come out, or these these mandates, essentially, if you want to receive state funding specifically, or have state employees stay at your hotel or your establishment, then we have pushed that information out to our businesses, not only our hotels and motels, but also, our city, they run a campground. The Clay County Conservation, they also run and have cabins as well. And so those are some of the things that we really try to stay on top of. And we always appreciate the representatives and senator keeping us up to date on that, as well as the tourism offices in Des Moines, and then pushing that information out to our businesses as well. So yeah, you may come back up, Lenny, and have another question.
Okay, when I was in Council Bluffs, you're talking about those posters. Yes, we did. We took it on ourselves, the Tea Party. We took it on ourselves to get that information out. It was put out by the Rotary Club was the one that financed it, and they put them out, and then we got them from Southwest Coalition on Human Trafficking, about 70 miles around, all the law enforcement, truck stops, everywhere. We did that. That is good. I'm glad it was brought up. But anyway, it is going out, but you can get more of it from Rotary Club or whatever, but that's the whole idea, working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. And yes, Senator Raleigh.
This is what I love about working with these two, because as we sit here, we get so many things going on, we tend to forget. And the Iowa Businesses Against Trafficking, they have a website. And I also want to remind you that any business, anybody can go on that website and take a look at it, and you can register as a business supporting it. It's a great organization. It just came up, and I'm a little bit embarrassed because the association that I belong to, we are members. And so I just wanted to add that. So please get involved. That's the most important thing. Please get involved. And it does happen in small towns. It does happen in any size of city. And as Representative Wills pointed out, we will be shocked to know what kind of hubs we have in the state of Iowa. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you for that question as well, Lenny. Mike Mart, if you would like to come back up to the mic, and I don't know if you had any other questions regarding CO2 into ethanol.
I'm Mike Mart, I live up by Esterville, farm with 2 boys. We got these pipelines, one's going east, Heartland Greenway, and the Rastettler one is going the other way, crossing our farms. And I got money in ethanol plants. And I don't know why we're even pushing this at all, because the simple fact is you can take CO2 and turn it into ethanol through a process that uses very little electricity. And so why are we even thinking about or okaying it that these pipelines should go through Iowa when every ethanol plant we got, like, I don't know, is it 23 or something in the United States, in Iowa? And if they all can make ethanol right there at their plant by turning the CO2, it's a little process. You look it right up on the internet. And look, just last night, every time I go in there, something new comes on. And how much closer they're getting to do this. And the money, we got money in the ethanol plant over to Lyle, which is northeast Iowa. I've talked to the guy over there when they first got these CO2 letters. They were going, one was going one way and one was going the other. And I called him. I said, "Is this?" And in the meantime, I looked up on the internet to figure out what the hell we can do with the CO2. I looked it up and I found this, that you can turn it into ethanol. And I asked the manager over there, I said, "Is this true?" And he said, "Yes." But he said, problem is it's 2 years down the road. So why were you pushing this or even letting it happen, causing all kinds of farmers going to screw up their tile lines and you name it. And besides that, I do not want anything. I don't think anybody else wants a pipeline with CO2 running across within, like our place, it's like 150 feet just across the road. And why are you guys why isn't you guys, you happen to be all Republicans, besides, and we're getting this inflationary BS going on, why are we even letting this happen? If we turn, and the thing I read last night is a 50 million gallon corn ethanol plant, which would be the size of Superior and Emmitsburg, has CO2 stream of 14 metric tons per hour. This is CO2 coming out of it. If turned into ethanol, it would equal 37% more ethanol from the same amount of corn. So, and in order to do that, sunlight can be used to generate the electricity that is to turn the CO2 into ethanol. So I see no objective whatsoever for the pipeline other than Mr. Rastetler, or the one Valero's got the other one. Somebody's going to make a bunch of money from the government, which you and I pay taxes on credits. And I don't see why we should let any individual go through our private land for his benefit.
Thank you for your question. We will go ahead and turn that over to Representative Wills. If you'd like to start, please.
Always get the tough ones.
It ain't tough. Put yourself in my shoes if you were a farmer and that thing was going beside it and you had ethanol money in the ethanol plant. Just put yourself in my shoes.
So,
It's easy to answer.
yeah, and I'll try to answer. So, I mean, it's very simple for me. It basically, the companies, they're private businesses who are doing these pipelines. They feel like they can make money off of it. Very likely they can. They have a business model, and they have followed the rules that our state has set. And I, for one, do not want to see condemnation. I want to look at what makes a utility. I want to look at what makes public good. But currently, the rules in place, the laws in place have been followed. And so I don't like to see, and I can't see us stepping in halfway through the game after a company, or in this case, 3 companies, have followed the rules for years. They have been planning this for years to do this. But we definitely need to look at what is public good for the future and what is a public utility, or what is a utility. You can't call it a public utility because things like Mediacom has the ability to do the same things, but they're a private company. Black Hills Energy could put gas lines in the ground. They can do the same thing. They're a private company. And so you can't say we have to limit it to just public utilities, because that doesn't fit either. And so it's a very complex issue. And the companies that have already announced and are moving towards doing these pipelines have followed the laws that have been in place for years. But I do say we need to try to limit and eliminate as much eminent domain as possible, because I don't think that's the good spirit of what we want to see here. But the one company I know has already paid a friend of mine $34,000 for an easement across his property for a 100-foot construction easement that goes down to 50 feet after the pipeline is built. Well, how can we stop them in the middle of that project after they paid millions of dollars towards easements already? And so it's a very complex issue. It's not just something where you can just simply say, stop it, because we've got investors, we've got people all over the state of Iowa who have already worked towards this. My friend, who I just said was paid $34,000, he's excited about it because he's going to be able to improve his field and do certain things. And so, like I said, it's very complex. It's a tough issue because you're talking about eminent domain in many instances, or some instances, and we don't want to see that at all. I don't think any one of us want to see that. And so I'm not giving you a very good answer, because there's not a good answer.
I'm sorry, if you would come up to the mic, please. And I do need to have you keep it to about 1 minute, please.
This article I just came is as of published December 17th, 2020. They've just coming up with this stuff to take the CO2, how to process it and get this process done. So just because Vrastetler and the other boys have done this stuff a long time ago, it still doesn't make it right when we can make the ethanol out of CO2.
And so I'll answer that. I forgot about that portion of your question, but they have a business model that they want to pursue. It doesn't include that. Maybe they want to do that in the future. I don't know. But that's not, we don't sit here as legislators and say, we like this business, but not this business, and then legislate, unless it's unethical or illegal. We don't choose winners and losers as far as business types or business models are concerned. So maybe someday in the future somebody will be doing that, but that's not for us to decide.
Well, I mean, if I was in your shoes, and which I could be someday if I wanted to, that I would take it as personally as you could, and this is my reasons. It's like my reasons, that's why I already explained to you, my reasons why it's BS.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and let Representative Jones give some feedback on that as well.
Sure. So I think your initial question was, why are you guys letting this happen? And the truth of the matter is that we're not. This is an issue for the Iowa Utilities Board, and we've covered this issue at length in the last legislative forum, the last exit issue. So I won't go too far in it, but quite honestly, when you say I'm a farmer too. So, no, I'm going to talk. No, it's my turn.
I'm sorry.
It's my
I'm
turn.
sorry. Excuse me.
I've
Excuse
listened to
me.
this
We're
far
going to
enough.
let Representative Jones finish her answer. Thank you.
So House rules prevent legislators, and I'm sorry, we talked about this already at the last Eggs and Issues, but House rules prevent legislators from voting on bills in which they have a financial impact, and that's what we want. We do not want legislators voting on stuff that's going to help themselves out, right? So we rent 3 parcels of farm ground that these pipelines are going to go through. So I am conflicted out of voting on this issue. Rule 76, I would encourage you to read it. It explains exactly why I am prohibited from voting on this. So it's not that I'm letting this happen. It's not that I'm not letting this happen. It's that this is an issue for the Iowa Utilities Board, and I can't vote on it.
Thank you, Representative Jones. And Senator Raleigh.
Mike, this is a great example of those issues where you have the pros and cons and how each side of it is seen. The explanation Representative Wills has and Representative Jones they're spot on as far as why it's happening, because the rules, the laws are in place and they're to be followed, and that's how this happened. I thought, from my point of view in the Senate, when we had a bill, it was SF 2160 regarding the eminent domain, I thought that might be the magic bullet, if you will. That's going to limit, eminent domain being as far as private companies, to make sure that they could not use that. And then that opened up a whole can of worms of all these other businesses that absolutely need eminent domain, and puts them in one bucket. And so that bill, failed for support. But I thought that would be something that could help this situation. The people I've talked to, we've talked about public good. What is public good? One farmer I talked to, she had mentioned an example of when they took her father's land to create an intersection. And I remarked that was public good, because you needed that intersection for the public and all that. So that's where it's really running into the loggerheads here, because what is public good, what is private enterprise? In where I'm sitting right now, the companies are able to do this because they are able in the state of Iowa by law to do that. They're private enterprises. On the other side of the ledger, you have farmers that certainly could say no, certainly can get together and work together. That's very difficult. We know, as anybody in the same industry, we all operate it differently because we're all independent, business persons. But that it remains to be seen how that impact is going to be. Will they get 70% of farms? Will they not? And all that. It's a long process. And I believe that it's going to take years, honestly, in my opinion, for this to really run its course. It may be painful, but I think it's going to take years to run its course. I've heard amounts up to $100,000 for some farmers, and that definitely draws some attention, if they've got that much land. And while that sounds great, it just depends on who that owner is, who that operator is, that farm. So it has, unfortunately, it's got to play out. And I think all the reasons that Representative Jones and Wills gave up here, that is why we're where we're at right now legislatively.
Thank you for your response to that. We're going to go ahead and move on because we do want to get one more question in. I'd like to invite Chris Van Cleek to the podium. She has a question regarding medical freedom.
Yes, I'm Chris Van Cleek. I'm asking some questions in regard to HSB 647, the Medical Privacy and Freedom Act, and I understand that went through subcommittee and committee as well I believe this week, and so obviously it will be addressed. My concern with that is that I think legislatively we tried to do some things to combat or to balance the federal requirements that we've had in regard specifically to vaccination, and we're talking about COVID, of course, and this bill is not specific to COVID, is my understanding in looking at that. I think part of the challenges that we had, yes, we had legislation in October. I think that did give some support to employees as far as some benefits and things and gave them some options. I do believe that we're seeing part of the effect of all of this to our healthcare system, those related businesses. This is not specific to healthcare businesses, which I think is a good thing with the bill. We've seen varying handling of the mandates, of the religious and medical exemptions and how those have been handled. We've seen aggressiveness in some businesses and healthcare facilities where they want their employees vaccinated and they make it very difficult and make a choice of continuing to be employed or not to be employed in their organization. And so I'd like your interpretation of this bill. I'd like to hear what you have to say about if you think this is going to balance some of the rights of the employees. Will it protect their personal health information? We didn't see that happen during COVID at all. And so I'd like your interpretation of this bill, and obviously I'm in favor of it at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Chris. I would invite Senator Raleigh to take the question first. Representative Jones.
Yeah, sure. So it's a House study bill, and it ran through judiciary, and so I guess it's on me because Representative Wills is not in judiciary. But so we did let it pass out as currently written. That bill it's in poor form right now, and I think many people will say that it needs a lot of help. But I voted for it with the understanding and the word of the members who were on that bill that they were going to fix some of those issues. So it's not perfect. It's got a long ways to go, but I did vote for it because I understand what they're trying to do, and I trust that they're going to fix it before it hits the House floor. So I don't think that there's really much of an update beyond that because it's going to change.
Thank you. Representative Wills.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that question because we did some really good things, I think, in October, along with joining a lawsuit to fight what we believe was an unconstitutional mandate by the federal government, and it was mostly proven to be unconstitutional, and we won. That the federal government can't mandate businesses to require vaccinations, and that's just that. And so we won that. But more importantly, what we did in October was say that if you feel you have a religious exemption, the employee must accept it. They can't ask you, well, quote, give me a verse of the Bible. They can't ask you questions to make you prove that you have a religious exemption. If you have a religious exemption, I believe our First Amendment protects that, regardless of what you look at or think or what you do. But we also said that you have to accept if somebody says that vaccine is going to harm me, they have to accept it. And so they have to accept those two exemptions. I really don't know a whole lot about this bill, the House study bill. It did come out of a subcommittee Monday, and sometime this week.
They had a thorough discussion.
It was like 6-hour subcommittee, so it was huge. And then it went to judiciary this week. I know that for a fact. But I don't know a lot about it, to be honest. And so I'm going to trust what Representative Jones says. I'm interested in looking at this bill and seeing what it does in its final form and to see if I can support it. But at this stage, without knowing what the final form looks like, I'm not going to say I can support it because I try not to support bills I don't know what they are. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I really do think that what we've done already takes care of 90% of our issues and problems, but not all of them. And we recognize that. Hopefully we can get this House study bill so that we can have almost everybody taken care of in the state of Iowa and being treated as humans with rights versus just somebody to get a jab. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative Wills. And Senator Raleigh.
I don't know what the companion bill is in the Senate right now. I haven't seen it come up in judiciary. I can share with you a bill recently that was passed out of committee that will be going to the floor and or being moved on. And this bill is SF 2028. You might find it interesting. It requires written consent prior to immunization or vaccination of a minor. And we wanted to make sure that minors and all that were protected and that the parents were involved and would document and have documentation that the parents approved of any vaccinations at a school or anywhere else. This is a good bill. The bill prohibits immunization or vaccination of a minor prior to documented consent by the minor's parent or legal guardian. So I'm using this as an example just to let you know that this is a hot topic, vaccinations. When it comes to employers-employee relationship and what they can and can't do, going back to this segment, it's a priority, and when I'll be watching for it in the Senate and looking forward to the language that it has.
Thank you, Senator Raleigh. We have about 5 minutes before closing comments, and so with that, I'm going to combine a few of the comments that are on our sheet here and ask us just specifically if you would comment on workforce. And one of the comments related specifically to teachers and how to recruit and retain teachers. And so if you'd like to talk a little bit about just workforce in general within the state of Iowa, and we can go ahead and start with Senator Raleigh.
Well, you're all aware workforce is a national issue. I mean, it's a worldwide issue, actually, when you look at it. You've heard the term the Great Resignation. We've seen what's going on in the last year or so. When things even temporarily were shut down, we had a lot of daycares closed down. You had a lot of people migrate back to their homes to take care of the kids and families and everything. It's quite a process trying to claw our way back to providing, new employees, younger employees, if you will, especially in communities like where we live, the demographics where we live. And so we're firsthand watching this happen. I can tell you it's happening in Des Moines. It's happening at every city in Iowa, let alone the United States. What the governor's plan is trying to create business partnerships, for example, for access to daycare, to start working together, partner and invest the funds, if you will, to get more people hired on, to offering educational resources, whether it's for RNs, whether it's for HVAC training, anything to get people more involved in the workforce. I think on the business side, you are seeing, somebody mentioned $17 an hour, you are seeing businesses in commercial, corporation, whatever, working to get those wages to a place where it's more enticing and more helpful to get us more workers involved. I can tell you that it's a top issue down Des Moines to try to figure this thing out. But I would remind all of us that when you have the sort of retraction that we had this last couple of years, it's not just a turn on the spigot. There's a lot of older workers that were in the ages of 58 to 63 that said, I'm out, and they're all done. And what they leave is a great brain drain of how talented and skilled those workers were, and we're hoping to fill that in a short amount of time. So anything that we can do legislatively to shore up, whether it's businesses, whether it's education, budgeting, all of this ties into workforce. It really does. I would say if I were taking a step out of this role and looking at it, it is the #1 priority. Is that any comfort for us? It is. I think it is. Because this starts with planning, starts with supporting, and starts with communicating and recognizing that issue and then finding a way to solve it. So that's been my impression with workforce. I just say stay the course. We'll do the job we can to get that back up.
Thank you, Senator Raleigh. And Representative Wills, I would invite you to take a few minutes to comment on this.
Sure. Workforce is a huge issue in Des Moines. We're looking at multiple avenues of approach for that, from anywhere from taking our unemployment insurance from 6 months down to 4 months, which is the lowest legal limit that we can do according to the federal government, to multiple other things, daycare, and all kinds of things. As far as teachers are concerned, retaining teachers, we're really, Representative Jones talked about SSA, state supplemental aid. We're going to provide $159 million of new money this year for state supplemental aid, and that's 2.5% increase. We're in trouble right now. This is just me talking. I'm not talking about anything else, but we're in trouble when we have Quick Starts paying $17, which is a $30,000 a year job, and we got beginning teachers only making $34,000 a year. I think that's an issue we need to look at. But when you look at how do we increase salaries across the board for beginning teachers, you're looking at millions. I mean, when 2.5% is $159 million, you're looking at a lot of money for just a little bit of change. And so I don't know how we deal with that. I don't know what we can do, but we definitely need to look at that. We need to look at that. I personally have a bill that I passed out of committee Thursday night for retention or for recruiting new teachers. It would be maybe a more mature teacher, somebody who didn't plan on teaching in their life, but they have a 4-year degree. They could take a preparatory class, learn the pedagogy of teaching, how the basics of teaching, putting together a work plan and how all the teaching stuff goes together. Look at the subject that they want to teach, take a test to prove that they know both of those things, that they're competent, then they can be licensed in the state of Iowa. So I'm looking at that as maybe a person like me who wants to get into a second career. And by the way, I was a licensed teacher. My license is expired. So those are things that we're looking at. We're looking at out of the box kind of things that we can do in the state of Iowa to really recruit people to the state, to recruit teachers, to recruit daycare workers, anybody that we have job openings for. We're looking at using our community colleges as a training platform to very quickly train up people from who don't have much of an education to at least a certificate or to something. You can get into being a plumber and make $60,000 a year right away. Get a CDL license and drive truck and make $60,000 a year. Those are some things we need. We need truck drivers, or we need plumbers. The average plumber in the state of Iowa, I think, is 62 years old. And so we're going to have people replacing those, and our community colleges are going to fill that role. So there's so many things that we're doing, and I know we're running close to time, and I want Representative Jones to talk too, because she's like looking like she has something to say.
Representative Jones, you could may go ahead and comment on that, and also if you want to start with your closing comments after answering that question.
Sure. So I was hoping someone would talk about Senator Rowley's really amazing bill that he ran off the Senate floor this week. So, well, I don't want to steal your thunder, but he did great work on a bill that we kind of joke about, but is really important. So the bill would have let 14-year-olds roll out pizza dough. And while that seems like a simple enough concept, it is illegal in Iowa for a 14-year-old to make pizza dough. And so let's ease that burden on the pizza makers and let these 14-year-olds roll out some pizza dough. So it's a simple enough concept, but for one reason or another, that was illegal in Iowa. And so the Senate gave that to Senator Raleigh to run off the floor as his first bill, and everybody voted no. And then they all switched their votes before it was recorded. So he got a little freshman introduction there. But in any case, there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and how do we solve this, and what can we all do? I will advise you, and I know this is maybe an ugly topic up here, but there is a workforce bill floating about the legislature, and it is not about workforce. It includes some unemployment provisions, and those have a few problems, but the bigger problems are the ones that are tackling lawsuits that really have nothing to do with unemployment, or I'm sorry, with workforce. It's just about making sure that victims don't have access to the resources that they need in order to recover from a tragic accident, whether that's medical malpractice or whether that's if they're in an accident with a commercial motor vehicle. And for some reason, we've made certain people super citizens in this bill and made them immune, basically, to lawsuits and capped the damages of those lawsuits and non-academic damages in this bill. So if you hear about this workforce bill, it sounds really flashy, like a great idea when you're just reading the title, but when you dig into it, it's got a lot of really ugly pieces floating about. So that said, if you see that we don't pass the workforce bill, don't be surprised, because it's a really ugly piece of legislation. So I just caution you there. But in any case, I'll just kind of wrap up here. And I will say the three of us are going to have to run out the door, because we have to be in Okoboji starting at 11, and that forum's on a really tight time frame because we have to be out of that forum by noon because it's at a restaurant and those people want to make sure they have places to park cars. So we've really got to scoot out of here. But I do appreciate you all being here. I appreciate the questions. I always appreciate your engagement. If you didn't get your question answered, feel free to shoot us an email. We're usually actually pretty accessible in that regard. But I really do appreciate that. I do also want to give a shout out to Amanda Bear, who's been working really hard on a bill with me. On direct shipment of distilled liquor. And that's a really important bill for our community because we have such an amazing distillery in Spencer that has created this concept where their bottles, the bottles come directly from a specific farm. And so if someone in Florida wanted a bottle of corn, whiskey, a bottle of corn made from a Clay County farm, they would not be able to get it. And so what this bill does is open those doors so that they can ship it using FedEx or UPS or a shipping service, so that friends and family are able to obtain those bottles as mementos. And I think it's a really exciting piece of legislation, and it's really coming right out of Century Farms, because you guys really created the reason as to why this needed to happen. This isn't a bottle of Jack Daniels that you can just go buy at any convenience store. This is a particular bottle with particular memories, with particular farms, and so it's really important that we get that bill moving. Came out of state government this week, and hopefully we'll get it off on the floor here shortly. But those are my closing comments. Sorry, I took a lot of time there.
Thanks so much, Representative Jones. Representative Wills, your closing comments.
Well, so I want to thank everybody for being here, for the good discussions. I think that I really appreciate and enjoy coming to Spencer, because we always get a whole variety of different things, and some topics we know a little bit about, some topics we know a lot. So I just want to say that. I just want to also say that we covered a lot of things this week, and I'm very happy for that, because Iowa is a diverse state, but we really need to look at our workforce. And if you've got ideas, if you've got thoughts, let's do that. We're all about, I think all three of us are all about promoting getting rid of regulations that are sometimes onerous on our business owners, and what Representative Jones just talked about is a perfect example of that. What does that law really do? It stops our local businesses, our bread and butter, from doing business across the nation, and we want our bread and butter businesses, our mom and pop stores, our local businesses to thrive, and whatever we can do to do that, we're going to work on and do. Because that's how we work. That's Iowa. We love working. We love doing things, and we're the best in the nation at doing that. And so we're really excited about that. We're going to create a good tax environment for those local mom and pop stores and businesses to thrive as well, and for each one of you to have the money to go to those stores and buy the products that you want. So really excited about that, and I'll let Senator Raleigh talk.
Great, thank you.
I also want to thank everybody for being here. You might have noticed I'm probably a little different than I was last time we met, and I think that comes with experience and just being there. And it's a privilege to be able to do this. One thing I want to jump in, we talked about workforce earlier. So when we look at the state income tax, think about that. How will that help workforce? That takes us from the 8th highest in the nation for state income tax to the 4th lowest in the nation. That is more money in the pockets of people who move here. That plumber that somebody mentioned at $60,000 a year, that's a true savings of being in this state. And that all supports workforce. Last, I would say our community colleges, those partnerships, that education helps develop workforce. My last comment will be, yes, I floor managed a pizza dough rolling machine bill, and it was a fantastic experience. And I have to tell you, I've become so close to the other senators, both sides of the aisle, wonderful group of people, and I want to thank you for letting us talk to you today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Senator Raleigh, Representative Wills, and Representative Jones. It has come time to go ahead and close this Eggs and Issues session. On behalf of the Spencer Chamber, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today and for those who have submitted questions. I would also like to thank Becky Fear-Hadding for her 25 years of service to the Spencer Chamber. This was her final event. We will be having a retirement party for her on Friday. Thank you again to our area legislators who are willing to give up their time on the weekend and to share information about what's currently happening at the State House. To our event sponsors, Spencer Municipal Utilities and Northwest Bank, Clay County Farm Bureau for providing bottled water for all our attendees. Thank you also to the Spencer Police Department, Spencer Municipal Utilities, Mediacom, Spencer Radio Group, and the Spencer Daily Reporter for covering this forum so those in Northwest Iowa can be as up-to-date as possible on statewide topics. Please be sure to grab the legislators' newsletter on your way out. The final session for Eggs and Issues will be on Saturday, March 19th, also here in the Spencer City Hall Council chambers. Thank you again, and have a great day.